Okay, and we're in the last part of this N.I.N.A tutorial series. And in this part, we'll be looking at guiding, but also at the various plugins that are available for N.I.N.A. Some of them are really so necessary that you absolutely have to install them. And for instance, 3-point polar alignment would be one of those because it lets you get perfect polar alignment directly from N.I.N.A. And as you know, good polar alignment is essential for good guiding, good tracking, good go-to, good everything, right? And we've already set up everything else that's necessary. So let's look at the plugins tab. So we've already had a quick look at the very start of this tutorial series with the plugins tab, and the way that you want to add, that you can add a plugin is simply to go to the available list of plugins, choose the plugin that you want to add. For instance, there is a Horizon Creator plugin. We've already shown how to create manually kind of your Horizon file in this tutorial earlier. And with this, you'd be able to actually use your mount to point to parts of your sky that are obstructed and create your Horizon file automatically rather than having to do it manually. That said, because you have to use your mount, it's a bit cumbersome, in my opinion, but it still works and it can be a good alternative. So you would go there, click on Install, and then you would need to restart N.I.N.A for it to appear. And there's tons of plugins in there, so I'm not going to go through all of them, especially since I don't know what half of them, or even more than half of them even do, but I'll go through some of the main ones that I would suggest, and the very first one is the 3-point polar alignment. So to install it, you would just go to 3-point polar alignment and then click Install. For me, it's already done, so I don't need to do that. You then need to, restart N.I.N.A as we showed earlier. And once it's installed, you have access to these options, which in general you can just leave as is, no problem with those whatsoever. And you can then go to the imaging tab. And in there, and we'll show it under the stars in a moment, you'll have the 3-point polar alignment plugin that's available here with a variety of settings. And the way that it will work is that it goes to an initial point that you can set. And from that initial point, it will move several times, actually 2 times, and take exposures each time before computing what your polar alignment error is and what you need to do to correct for that error. One thing that's fairly important is that you need to have your mount reasonably level for the instructions given by the 3-point polar alignment to be working most efficiently. I'd say up to 2 degrees, 3 degrees off from horizontal, you're still perfectly fine. And you'll just have to have a couple of more rounds of adjustments. But anyway, with that plugin, let's see exactly how to use it under the stars, as well as the guiding, how to, after we've done the polar alignment, how to do proper settings of your guiding from N.I.N.A to PhD2. So let's get to it. Okay, so let's see how the 3-point polar alignment works after we've installed the plugin. So the plugin is in there. I have 3-point polar alignment, and honestly, this shouldn't really be a plugin. It should be default in N.I.N.A. And there are some other plugins like N.I.N.A remote control via smartphone apps, for instance, that all make the assumption that you'll have 3-point polar alignment installed in N.I.N.A. So yeah, this one is quite important. Anyway, we've installed it, and I just want to show you how it works in general and how a lot of plugins actually work. You go to the imaging tab, and on the top side, the more you add plugins, the more you'll get icons. And you have the tools plugins, and then you have more the hardware-related plugins on the left. If we go to the tools, we see the very first one there is this little arc with 3 stars, which is the 3-star polar alignment. And bam, if I click on it, we get this interface coming up at the center of the screen. It might come somewhere else for you, in which case it might be on the right-hand side. You just want to drag and drop it to an area that's good for you to use. And you have other plugins there, like this scope control plugin that I have that lets me control my mount with nice and very large buttons in this particular case. So now let's look at the options that we have in there, just to briefly understand what's going on. There's the manual mode, which I won't really cover here. It's for when you have mostly a tracker that can control the right ascension kind of manually. and then you want to do the 3-point polar alignment. In this case, we have a nice go-to mount, and so you want to have this off in that case. And then you need to understand how it's going to work. N.I.N.A is going to point someplace in the sky, take an exposure, and use plate solving to figure out where it's pointed at. And so obviously it means that plate solving needs to be set up properly, which we've done earlier. We need to have the mount connected, we need to have the camera connected, and we need to have all of the parameters properly set up for all of this to work. And then it will move a certain number of degrees in a certain direction, for instance here 10 degrees, to a second point, and it turns via right ascension axis only, basically. So it would turn around the right ascension axis, 10 degrees, stop there, take a second exposure, figure out via plate solving where it's pointed at, and then do it a third time with a second 10 degrees slew, take a third exposure, analyze that, and then it figures out how far you are away from polar alignment and how to fix your polar alignment to get it perfect. So that's this measure point distance. It's this 10 degrees between points, which works very well, and it means that in total, N.I.N.A will just consume like 20 degrees. There's very little risk of anything bad happening with such a low number. You then have the telescope move rate, which is in degrees per second. I would just recommend keeping it at the default of 3 degrees per second, unless your mount cannot support it, in which case you can lower that to something that the mount can support. Some older Takahashi mounts, for instance, might slew slower than that. And then you have something called the direction east. This setting, if I use it with this mount, it goes in the correct direction that I want it to go, I think. We'll see that in a moment. But if I use it on, I believe, the AM5N mount, it goes in the opposite direction. So east might not be like it's a relative east. It's, your other right or something like that. It's kind of weird. So you want to just test it out. And, if the telescope goes in the direction you want it to go, leave it on. If it goes in the direction you don't want it to go, set it off and you'll be fine. And then you have something very interesting, which is, do you start from current position or do you start from a certain position that you have the coordinates in altitude, so and azimuth here, not equatorial. And this guy there is basically more or less, at least for my latitude, like the celestial pole-ish, like home position kind of thing. But let's say I have visibility to the north celestial pole that I want to align to. But let's say you don't have visibility, you are on a smaller balcony, you don't see it, so you could manually point your telescope any point in the sky where you know that you can slew 10 degrees and then 10 more degrees and still be able to see stars. So kind of like an arc that you know you'll be able to see stars. Point your telescope to the first point on this arc and then select Start from Current Position. And then N.I.N.A will just, or this 3-point polar alignment plugin, will start there and just use whatever portion of the sky you've fed it, and you don't need to have visibility onto the north or south celestial pole for this to work. If you're just using it like casually and you have visibility towards your celestial pole, you can just keep it as default. Then you can select the filter, which for me is the luminance filter, and we are indeed the luminance filters, so current is fine. The exposure time that you want to have for each of your plate solving, so you want to make sure it's something that's going to work for plate solving. And you can change the binning, the gain, offset, and some solver settings. I would recommend to keep it as is default, right? So let me turn off the main light there, just so that we see what happens when we run the process and what results we get. Okay, so here we go. I'm just going to click on the play button and let's see exactly how this works. So you can see that as I click on the play button, we have this retrieving first measurement point. And so for now, it's just slewing to the initial coordinates that were set up here, right? If I had told it to start from current position, it would have started from current position. Now it's taking an image to solve, and you can see it has taken an image, and it's now moving to the next point, traveling towards the east for me, at least for this particular mount. This setting with east is on worked fine. And now it's taking a second image that it's going to solve to understand. And once it's done, it will start moving 10 more degrees, there it is, to the east, and take a third image. So it's waiting for the slew to be done, it's settling the mount, and then it's going to take a third 4-second exposure. Okay, and here we go. It has computed my polar alignment error. So there's something to understand, and you'll see a message if that happens. If your polar alignment error is large, let's say more than half to 3/4 of a degree, so let's say 40 arc seconds. For me, it's 16. So we're arc minutes. For me, it's 16 arc minutes. So we're kind of good. And you see it keeps taking pictures just to refresh things automatically. But we're kind of good. I'll do some quick changes and then nothing more to do. We'll be polar aligned. But if you're far away from perfect polar alignment, more than half a degree, especially if you're using 3-point polar alignment away from the celestial pole because you're on a balcony and you don't have visibility onto the celestial pole, you want to run this twice. You want to run it once to get, like maybe not perfect polar alignment, just like go to it until it says the total error is like 15 arc minutes, something like that. Then you stop the process. You go to your telescope control settings. So I could use this plugin there. Go to the home position again. I mean, honestly, you don't really need to do that, but I like to do that just to make sure I'm all reinitialized and everything is fine and back to normal. And then you run it again, and you do the polar alignment from scratch a second time. And you might see, or you will actually likely see, that the measured error will be worse than those, let's say, 15 arc minutes that you had in the first run. And this is because you have errors that accumulate, especially if it starts with a large polar alignment mismatch. And also, if you're away from the celestial pole, the longer you take to polar align your mount, the more those errors accumulate with time. And this is the case, by the way, for the ASI error as well. So if you're using the ASI error, it doesn't tell you anything about too large of an error, whereas the N.I.N.A 3-point polar alignment does tell you that. But yeah, N.I.N.A, if you're starting with a large error, do it twice in a row just to get better precision. Anyway, you can see that it tells me I should move to the right by 3, or let's say 4 arc minutes, and move it down by 16 arc minutes. So let me quickly do that. So I've moved it down a little bit. Let's see what happens. It's going to take another exposure. It keeps taking exposures automatically. And now you can see I've moved it down, and immediately my error is much, much lower, which is good. I can lower it a tiny bit more, something like that. See what happens. And now we're almost dialed in terms of the altitude of the mount. And as usual for polar alignment, by the way, you do not touch the mount controls themselves. You only touch the altitude and azimuth adjustment physical on your equatorial mount, right? So that's important. Let me try to see if I can get the azimuth error correct. And yeah, we are really close. I'm 1 arc minute away from polar alignment, so I'm good. But let me assume that I started from a large error. So I'm going to stop the process, and I'm going to, I don't need to go home, but I'm going to go home just so I, reset the situation. And as I'm home, I will rerun the 3-point polar alignment. So now let me run it. Go. So it's again doing the whole process. I'm going to cut to the point where it's actually gone through the whole process. And we can see that even because I spent so much time like yabbering about and explaining stuff, now it measures the error at 3 arc minutes. I'm perfectly fine with that. So I'm just going to stop this and go to my scope control plugin, go home, and now I'm ready to image. So now that we have good polar alignment, we can go ahead and make sure that we have the guiding stuff set up in N.I.N.A. And so let's go together and set up the guiding from N.I.N.A. Okay, so in N.I.N.A, if you go to the Equipment Guider tab, as we saw a bit earlier, you have multiple options for guiding. And the one that I'm going to show today is really PhD 2, which is what we installed earlier. And I'm also going to briefly touch on Direct Guider as well. I'm actually going to start with that. Direct Guider is probably like the very first thing that I contributed to N.I.N.A. And this is basically if you don't have a guide scope are an off-axis guide camera, so you don't have any guiding equipment, you still want to dither between your frames. Dithering is moving your telescope a tiny bit in between your exposures so that you can average out any fixed pattern noise that you have on your camera, and you also can do some cool operations like drizzling after you've taken a lot of exposures of your target. That lets you get like more resolution kind of for free, especially if you use something like Blur Exterminator and then resampling down to restore the initial signal to noise ratio. That goes like in very deep. But the thing is, you should always remember that if you can dither, you should. That includes your professional obligations. If you can dither going to work, you should. No, so if you can dither your frames, you should. And if you do not have a guide scope or guide camera, you don't need one if you're using N.I.N.A to do dithering. N.I.N.A will do dithering in the blind. And that's the direct guider. You can just, select it, click on or tap on the connect icon, and then you can see that how many pixels do you want to dither by each time? What is your minimum settle time? And whether you want to dither only in the right ascension axis or not. Typically, if you have both right ascension and declination is doesn't have too much backlash, dithering, you can set dithering in RA only to off. That's really recommended. And the way that all of this works is that it will use the parameters of your mount and of your telescope, especially the focal length of your telescope and the pixel size of your camera. So you need to have those set up properly to estimate how long of a guide pulse N.I.N.A needs to send to your mount to move 5 pixels in this case, or whatever number of pixels, let's say 20 pixels in between frames. And it will do it in a way that is smart, in that it tries to dither in the blind, but in a way that makes sure that your target over multiple dithers stays centered. So initially when I built it, I had some really not silly, let's say silly algorithms that would basically prioritize dithering into the opposite quadrant or even half circle from the previous dither. That way you were always sure to kind of like move around but keep the target centered. I've looked at the code recently and it's been reworked into something much better. So yeah, it works really really well. So if you don't have a guider, you can use this direct guider to dither. So it's really direct dithering effectively. It doesn't do any guiding, it just does the dithering, and it's amazing. But otherwise, you would have PhD2, and if you select PhD2 in there and you click on the gear icon, you have tons of options. And the good thing is that most of the options, you're going to have access to it after you connect to PhD2. The important one, and you can leave it on like that by default unless you've done some customization when you installed PhD2. It is the PhD2 path as well as the host name and port. And you can keep everything here default except if you did some custom stuff. Just make sure that phd2.exec is indeed at this location. And if you click on connect here, because it knows where phd2.exec is located, it's able to launch phd2 based on this exec and tell phd2 just launch with your default profile. And phd2 can see it has connected the camera, and it seems to have connected the mount as well. So like phd2 is like, I'm ready to go, right? So that's one of the cool things here with this integration. Now this video is not about phd2, so I'm not going to go into the details of phd2. I have a separate video about all of the guiding primer, the ultimate guide to guiding, something like that. I'll put the link up above and down in the description. It really goes into all of the basics of auto guiding from setting up PhD2 to really figuring out errors or issues that you have with your guiding. And there are some parameters here. We went over them a little bit already. So in those settings, we have things like dither pixels, which is here 20 pixels. And what this means, we can look on the left-hand side exactly what that means, because we have the camera pixel scale, and it's computed for my particular setup based on the equipment information that we have set up in N.I.N.A with the focal length and the pixel size. of 30.24 pixels, and that's perfectly fine for me. I like to have a number of pixels that is non-whole on my dither pixels for the main camera, so that's perfectly fine. And we also have, for information, the guider pixel scale here. So we can see that my main camera has 1 arcseconds per pixel roughly, and my guide camera has 1.59 arcseconds per pixel, because it's an off-axis guider, so it has the same focal length as my main telescope, but it has larger pixels, which means that this dither pixels of 20 pixels on the guider will mean 30.24 pixels in terms of the dither distance that we have. And yeah, again, dither or die, so always have some nice dither going on. And if you can avoid it, dither, do not dither in RA only, dither in both directions as much as possible. And then you have the settle pixel tolerance, and the settle pixel tolerance is basically after PhD2 has done a dither, it basically restores the guiding, kind of, and when the guiding is nice and stable to within this tolerance, then PhD2 will say to N.I.N.A, yeah, we're good, I'm guiding fine, and N.I.N.A will go to the next exposure. In the meantime, N.I.N.A will wait, but N.I.N.A will wait a minimum of 10 seconds, a maximum of 40 seconds. So that's what this means, right? So right now we're saying like the settle pixel tolerance is going to be 1 pixel, which means effectively 1.59 arcseconds, which is perfectly fine. We're going to wait for that to be at least 10 seconds so that we know this is not a fluke, right? We're just like constantly within that 1.6 arcseconds. And if after 40 seconds, PhD2 has still not told us like it's stable and good, we're going to image anyway, right? We're going to stop waiting for PhD2. And so those parameters are very much dependent on your equipment and how well it works for you, and you might need to fine-tune them for yourself. Guiding start retry, if it has trouble starting guiding, you can ask it to retry, so that's you could turn that on if you ever have issues. Otherwise you can leave it at off. And then you have guiding start timeout, how long N.I.N.A will wait for PhD to start guiding. You know, after a meridian flip, for instance, N.I.N.A will send a start guiding command to PhD2. At the start of a sequence or after it has slewed to a new target, it will send a start command, depending on how you set up your sequence, and how long it will wait until PhD2 reports back to N.I.N.A, hey, I've started successfully, right? And then after 300 seconds, N.I.N.A will like, okay, never mind, even though I didn't hear from PhD2, I'll just start imaging anyway. Or if you have the retry, it will try again. Then there's the ROI percentage to find guide star, whether you want to limit, where PhD2 will look for a guide star. I recommend just leaving it at 100%. You don't want, especially if you're using an off-axis guider and you have a limited field of view on your guide chip, you just want to keep it at 100%. And then here you have the PhD2 profile that you want N.I.N.A to launch automatically. And I'm using my Newtonian telescope, so I want to use my nude profile, and this corresponds to equipment profile. So if I stop the exposures, I go to my profiles there. I'm gonna disconnect all just to show you. We have SQF55 and Newt profiles with different drivers, different hardware, different focal lengths set up. Everything is set up differently, right? So we tell N.I.N.A which profile to use, and in my case, it is the Newtonian here. And that's all of the setup in there. And then of course, there are the guide commands in the sequencer, as well the dithering commands in the sequencer. So if I go to my Sky Atlas, I select whatever, M31, it's not really visible these days, but I don't care. I'm going to add a target to the sequencer as a monochrome sequence. You can see that part of my sequence is like here, start guiding. And under start guiding, you even have force calibration or not. If you're familiar with PhD2, you know that if it's on a new equipment setup, PhD2 will, at the very first thing, do a guiding calibration. It will basically move the mount around like by small increments in all directions, and then figure out how much that actually moves the stars on its own guide chip. to see like, hey, if I tell it to move like 1 second in the north direction, how many pixels can I expect my star to move by on my guide chip, and in what direction? And it does the same for south, west, and east, and then it figures out exactly how it needs to work. It's pure magic, and you could force the calibration to tell PhD2 like by default, PhD2, if you're using ASCOM to connect to the telescope from PhD2, it will remember that calibration. It doesn't care where it's pointed in the sky, it remembers that calibration, and then it will reuse it. But if you don't want PhD to reuse that calibration, you can just say like force calibration to on, and it will do that. And so that's this start guiding stuff. And then we have the trigger dither after 3 exposures. Every 3 exposures, in this particular case, will do 1 dither of PhD2, or if you have set up the direct guider, so what we showed earlier, it will do the dither in the blind to do this, to achieve this particular command. You have some other triggers, by the way, that can help you kind of rescue guiding if there are issues. I could say like, hey, have a trigger that restores guiding if for whatever reason it was interrupted. Like if N.I.N.A detects interrupted guiding, just restore the guiding, which can, because it starts the guiding again, you have this 300-second timeout that could eat into your imaging time. So it's always something to think about, like what exactly do you want to do? And then, of course, you have a stop guiding command that you typically never need to have in your sequence, but it's available. And all of those like set guider shift rate and the trigger as well as stop guider track shift. I do believe that this is part of a plugin that I have installed, which is called Orbitals, that lets you basically find planetary type of targets like comets, asteroids, the planets in the solar system, that kind of stuff. So with that, you may want to guide at a non-sidereal speed. So that's where these commands come from, but they're not useful to us. So I'm just going to skip them. So in the end, how does this all look like? I can simply go to my imaging tab. I'm going to go to my manual focus targets. Yeah, Vega, that's good. I'm going to slew to Vega. And it tells me there's some weird stuff there, so that it should redo another calibration rather than reuse something that already exists. So we're probably going to see some really weird results, but that's not really the point. We can see the guide graph here in PhD2, and you've probably noticed that underneath here in N.I.N.A, we have the same guide graph appearing in N.I.N.A. So you can monitor what's going on here from the N.I.N.A interface, and you can see on this guide chart exactly what's going on, what is your total guiding figure, what is the figure in declination, in right ascension, and you have all of the corrections as well. So you have the main information here available directly in the N.I.N.A interface. And similarly, if you go under Equipment, Guider, you have access to the same graph. You can change the unit to be arc seconds, and then you see exactly what's going on. So that's the usual stuff. It works great, and that's the gist of it in N.I.N.A. Again, if you want more details about how to set up guiding, how to do guiding calibration in PhD2, etc., I have another video on the topic. The link is down in the description if you're interested. So that's for the guiding. Let's look. Now that we've looked at the 3-point polar alignment to get good polar alignment, which is critical for good guiding, and we've looked at the guiding settings and how it all works, including in sequence, let's have a look at some other plugins. And one of the plugins that I want to show you is something that I have installed, which is called the Filter Offset Calculator. So there's nothing to see here, move along. And that's a very simple plugin that can be doing something really, really nice. So let me go to the Imaging tab, and under the Imaging tab, you will have a new icon, this guy here, Filter Offset Calculator. And if you click it, this tab will appear here somewhere in your interface. And what this does is that it will go through each of the filters that you have selected there, and it will do autofocus runs. For example, it will do here 3 autofocus runs in luminance, 3 autofocus run in red, green, blue, sulfur, H-alpha, and oxygen 3, all of my filters. And I need to make sure it has the dark filter disabled. And then it will set that up under Options, Autofocus, and the focus offset that we have here. So it will set that up automatically for you so that you can set a default autofocus filter. For instance, the luminance one could be your default autofocus filter if you have like the use filter offsets as on and set this as the default autofocus filter. And you can also avoid refocusing when you change your filter on the filter wheel. It is super powerful, and this plugin lets you do that automatically. And just to show you how it looks like, we're going to set to the minimum number of iteration, which is 2, and I'll just let it run on luminance and red, just those two. I'm going to click play and show you what happens. So you can see immediately autofocus is getting run. And let's wait a little bit for this particular autofocus run to be complete. And there you can see it has done one autofocus on luminance. It took 2 minutes. I'll let it do a second run on luminance, and then what's going to happen is that it's going to switch to the red filter and do exactly the same thing. Do 2 autofocus runs, and for each it will compute the average best focus point, and that will be put into the filter offsets. So let this process finish on its own, and I'll show you what happens when it has finished running. And so at the end, this is what it looks like. So actually I was kind of wrong in the order of things. It did 1 autofocus for luminance, then 1 for red, then back to luminance, and then back to red. This is to make sure it averages out, every other condition. It loops through the filters rather than one after the other, just to make sure that temperature changes, which affect the tube length, for instance, by some microns, which can affect the focus points, are kind of averaged out by going through each filter one after another, and then a second iteration, and then maybe a third iteration with the default settings. And then we get something like this. These are our current offsets set to 0, and the new ones will be 50-37 and 50-40. This is the QHY Minicam 8. I've already shown that for this camera, the filters are pretty much perfectly parfocal, so the offsets don't really do anything for us. But you can see, I can say like, yeah, let's accept that. Let's use relative offsets, and let's set luminance as my autofocus filter. Click on accept, and now if I go to my options, autofocus, you can see that luminance is my autofocus filter. We have use filter offsets, and you can see the filter offset has been set to just 3 here because we had only a 3-step difference between luminance and red. And obviously I should have taken for all of the filters, but I wanted for time purposes to quickly show you how it would look like. And it warned me like less than 2 filters selected for offset calculation. It's absolutely right. I should have all of the filters selected except dark, because the dark filter is obviously unrelated to any of that. And that is the filter offset calculation plugin, and you can see it's very useful if you have a monochrome camera. Some other plugins of interest would be things like the connector. This is just a plugin that allows you to put connection and disconnection instructions in your advanced sequencer. So if I go to my advanced sequencer, at any point I could say like, okay, I want to disconnect a piece of equipment, something like during the after I've done my imaging. Let's say I want to make sure that I disconnect my camera after it has warmed up, for instance. I could disconnect all of the equipment. All of these connector stuff are provided by that particular plugin. I think it's very nice to have. You could also make sure that your equipment is connected at the very start by having this connect all equipment instruction at the very start of your sequence. So that's some really neat tricks to have and to use as this connector plugin. Okay, so that's a fairly straightforward one. Then we have plugins that let you have better or potentially better autofocus, and this is called Hocus Focus, and it kind of replaces the N.I.N.A engine if you wish to do so. And in addition to that, Hocus Focus lets you have an aberration inspector of your images, so it can measure the tilt and curvature of your field of view fairly precisely. And so if you have a tilt adjuster, you can use Hocus Focus to really adjust the tilt very precisely on your tilt adjuster. And if you want to use it, like if you have trouble with the vanilla autofocus and you want to use Hocus Focus instead, you would need to install it, and then under the options and then imaging, you'd want to go to the star detector, star annotator, and autofocus and switch those to Hocus Focus to use the plugin instead of the vanilla N.I.N.A stuff. So if despite this tutorial you had trouble like setting up the autofocus for N.I.N.A, like the stars didn't get detected or you don't get those nice V curves, something is going wrong, one thing you could try is go to the plugins, install the Hocus Focus, and then replace the default N.I.N.A autofocus with the Hocus Focus autofocus. That's a mouthful. And there's tons of settings in there. I'm not really going to go into them because I haven't really used Hocus Focus enough to really know how to use it well. I just know I've used it with the default settings. It worked great for me, but then so does the vanilla N.I.N.A autofocus for me. So I don't know really what more instructions to give based on my own experience, as I've not experienced the issues that you may be having. So, but that's still another one to have in your book, right? To have available if you have any trouble with autofocusing, or you have a tilt adjuster and you want to really have this aberration inspector to see how well or what screw you should be using to adjust the tilt. Another plugin that I find really nice is this ground station plugin. And this ground station plugin lets you get instructions in the sequencer to warn you if you have any issues with the sequence. So let's say you're not in bed yet, and your sequence is running without any issues. You're watching a movie, spending time with your significant other. Oh my word, what is going on? And something goes wrong with the sequence, then this ground station, plugin can send you an alert directly to your phone via a variety of techniques. There's pushover, telegram, email, if this then that, IFTTT, right, and other protocols in there. The ones that I was using personally was pushover. Pushover is like you have to do a one-time $5 payment, and then you can use it as much as you like. Once you've signed up for it, you can install an app on your phone, whether it's iOS or Android. And if you log in, you'll get an API key. And you can put that API key and user key, actually two things, in there. And then Pushover will be able to send you some alerts directly on your phone with notification, etc. So you can keep track of anything that's going on. And in the sequencer, if I search for pushover, at any point in the sequence, I could say like, hey, send a message to pushover, like starting imaging on M31, that kind of stuff. That's like for you to, when you reach a specific point in the sequence, bam, you say like, let's send a message to pushover, just so that you can be kept abreast of what's happening without having to actually check on N.I.N.A. Or you have a trigger as well, which sends an event to pushover whenever an instruction fails in your loop. So let me add a real sequence so we can see exactly what's going to happen. So let's say I add a sequence for M31, and then I could add, let's say, in here, failures to pushover as one of the triggers. And then any of the instructions below has an issues, it will send an error to pushover with whatever priority you want and whatever sound you want. So it's a pretty powerful thing. And there's, pushover is just one example of an integration. You have other integrations as well to receive notifications if something is going wrong. And there's other plugins that let you do that. There's this Discord notification thing where you can send a webhook, basically an alarm via URL, to a Discord server, and then you get a notification from your Discord app on your phone. It does require you to be a bit more technically aware than something like pushover. But you see, that's like for being aware of what's going on with your sequence without having to monitor it. And it's really nice. It's also super stressful. And I can tell you that my wife absolutely despises this plugin, Ground Station in particular, which is why these days I'm not using it. I'm just letting my sequences fail silently. It's better for, life in general. So there you go. Otherwise, There's some simple ones as well, like Orbuculum, which works in a sequence, and that's when you have multiple targets. So let me add multiple targets. Let's say I want to add like M42. I know it's like in this season it makes 0 sense, but I don't care. I'm just going to add M42 as a target. And then while I'm on the M31 instructions, instead of something like loop until the altitude of my current target is below some certain altitude, I can tell N.I.N.A to look ahead, and that's using Orbuculum. So you'll have a new section called Orbuculum under your instructions, and in there there's like, loop while the next target is below a certain altitude. So I could say like, okay, instead of looping until you're below 30 degrees, whenever my next target reaches 45 degrees, then we go to it. And so your loop on M31 depends on the altitude of your next target rather than the altitude of M31. It's a pretty cool stuff, and it really lets N.I.N.A, the sequencer, look ahead to what's coming next. So I really recommend having that as a plugin if you want to really fine-tune your advanced sequencer and you're doing multiple targets in a single night. Some other simple ones would be things like scope control. We looked at it a bit earlier, I think, under the stars. And scope control lets you add this tab here, scope control, where you can, say to the mount, like park the mount, go to home, start tracking, move in that direction, change the rate of movement, that kind of stuff. Simple stuff. And when it's in the imaging tab, by the way, whether it's 3-point pole alignment or scope control, we'll see the same under the stars, but you can use the icons there at the top to enable and disable that screen. And you can hover over any one of those icons to get a description of exactly what this icon controls. So that's some other simple plugin that can be useful to have. Another one that I really like is Remote Copy. This one lets you, in a sequence, add some instructions to say like, hey, copy the files from my picture folder in N.I.N.A to another folder, which can be on the same computer, or more interestingly, which can be on a network access storage. So that regularly N.I.N.A will copy your image files, the one that haven't been copied yet, to that other folder on network access storage or directly on your processing computer, so that when you wake up in the morning, all of your files are on your processing computer. You don't need to transfer files from like your N.I.N.A computer to your processing computer or to your NAS, whatever. It's done automatically for you, and you can do that with remote copy. So if I'm in the sequencer, I could say like, maybe I want everything to work normally during the whole session, and then because the sun like rises at like what, 4:30 a.m. in Japan these days, meaning it starts to get bright at 3:30, even 3 a.m., then I have ample time for N.I.N.A to automatically copy everything. So as part of my end sequence, so let's say I have my standard end template, like where is it? My awesome end, there it is, my awesome end. I could add an instruction in there that says, probably not even in parallel, I'll have it at the very end before disconnect all of the equipment. I could have, let's search for robocopy start, and I'll have it, let's say, even after I disconnect all of the equipment, from the folder where I save all of my N.I.N.A stuff to another folder. And in particular, if you're in Explorer and you want to copy those files to a network drive or to another folder that's on a share on your processing PC, you would need to make sure that the share is completely done on the processing PC. I have an old video about how to do that. If I remember, I'll put the link up above and down in the description. But basically, once you have the share properly working, you can, on your imaging PC with N.I.N.A, you can add a network drive, a mapped drive, sorry, and then you can put the address to your folder in there. Click finish. It should hopefully work. There it is, and now I have my NAS, my network access storage available directly from the N.I.N.A PC. So I could say robocopy start and copy the files in the N.I.N.A pictures folder, and then the destination will be my NAS drive there under, let's say, to process, and then I can have my a secondary folder, whatever, I don't care. Select folder, and now it will copy any file that is in there that isn't already in there, then gets copied. Super powerful stuff. So that's another really cool plugin to have. And by the way, like if you are watching and you have some recommended plugins, please let us know down in the comments, because there's tons of cool stuff around there and so many plugins and I don't know many of them. So everyone, check the comments, see if other people have other ideas. While you're there, leave a comment, leave a like on the video. It really helps the channel out. If you're new and you like this kind of tutorial or equipment reviews, etc., you could consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out. And if you want to support even more and you're planning on buying anything from N.I.N.A, High Point Scientific, or even Amazon, if you do so after clicking one of the links I have down in the description, it helps me out at no cost to you. If you want to sponsor the channel directly, you can become a channel member. It's the join button next to the subscribe button, or a Patreon supporter, and that is a link down in the description. Some of my Patreon ranks have access to my videos early and without ads, and I have an experiment going on with a Discord server for my Patreon members. So if that sounds interesting and you want to support the channel directly, there's that too. Anyway, let's go back to the rest of the tutorial here. There's some other cool stuff like Orbitals that lets you effectively find comets, asteroids, planets, etc. And also it will automatically update the orbital parameters of all of those objects for you. So if I go in the imaging tab and I have this little icon there for orbitals, that opens up a tab here. And you can see that you have comets, numbered asteroids, unnumbered asteroids, James Webb telescope if you want to image the James Webb telescope to see where it is in the sky. If you click on update, it will update the coordinates of the orbital parameters of that thing. It will also, I think, find comets from this MPC or JPL database, and there you can see it has 1209 comets available, and so you can keep track of solar system comets, asteroid kind of objects, and have them be able to slew to them easily. And then under the very top of your instructions here, under instruction set, you have like orbital object sequence that can drag and drop. So I already have one there, but I could say like drag and drop, and then you can select your comet, asteroid, etc. Just put in the name, it will search for it, add it, and then create your sequence kind of as usual. You can do the same with a solar system object body sequence. Say like, yeah, I want to image Saturn, whatever. And you have that, and you can slew to Saturn, have the proper rate for that, etc. And you have similar stuff for the James Webb Space Telescope if you want to image James Webb, which is very low in the horizon for me, obviously, but it's available there as well. All of those things available together with some more in-depth telescope control, like setting the telescope tracking rate for the particular object that you are imaging. So some really powerful stuff if you're into the non-deep space imaging, let's say the more, well, orbital related stuff as a plugin. Now I'll go to some very interesting plugins as well, which let you control N.I.N.A directly from a smartphone app, with actually two smartphone apps that are available. One is more ASIR looking, the other is more like N.I.N.A looking, I would say. And I'll go to that in a moment, but before that, some other little cool stuff. If you have an astromechanics adapter, you can control aperture of Canon lenses via your adapter using this little plugin there. You have an autofocus report analysis to really tell you what's going on with your autofocus. You have an exposure calculator that gets you your optimal exposure time based on your sky conditions. Optimal are what I like to call minimum exposure time based on sky conditions. You have the lens autofocus plugin that if you're using a Canon DSLR with a Canon lens, you can control the autofocus or the focus motor of that lens through the Canon DSLR body, in addition to taking pictures from that. I haven't tested it, but it looks really useful. Then you have some stuff for people who like to image when the moon is up, like the moon angle plugin. And this one lets you basically in your sequence start and stop a sequence or a target depending on how far away it is in terms of degrees from the moon. Another one of those plugins is Smart Filters that lets you kind of figure out how much or how you need to set up your filter exposures to reach some certain specific like exposure targets for each of your filters. Some really cool stuff in there. Then this one called synchronization is if you have multiple telescopes on the same mount and you are using two instances of N.I.N.A to control them, if you install this plugin on both, you can have synchronized dithering between the two, meaning that if one of the telescopes is still imaging and the other telescope wants to dither, the other telescope will wait for the first one to finish its exposure before doing dithering, and while it's dithering, the first telescope will wait until doing the next exposure. So it's a synchronized dithering mechanism between the two telescopes mounted on the same mount. You have the Target Scheduler, which is an insanely complex plugin that I still haven't managed to wrap my head around, but lets you basically automate your whole imaging. No more need to create sequences. This plugin, you just tell this plugin what you want to image and your some specific criteria that you want to fulfill, and then this plugin will just create the sequence for you and automatically do everything, as far as I understand. But it has a lot of documentation. I haven't managed to get into it yet. I kind of like doing my sequences manually still. Maybe I'm not lazy enough. Maybe I'm just a control freak. But that's a good one to look into. Okay, and then we get into the cool stuff that lets you control everything from really nice looking smartphone apps like the Advanced API plugin and Touch and Stars plugin. So I'm going to go to my installed plugins list. You have them here, Advanced API and Touch and Stars. So you really want to have, for these to work, Advanced API, and there's some security issues with that, but you need to make sure that you have this checkbox like use access control, allow origin header set to on. And you also want to make sure that you have the 3-point polar alignment installed to make sure that everything works. Those two are sufficient to use a free app on Android and iOS called Cygnus Astro. That's already really, really nice. And if you want an app that has a different interface and gives you access to a bit more features, it's Touch and Stars. That requires you to install the Touch and Stars plugin. By the way, when you install or update the Touch and Stars plugin, unlike other plugins, it can take like a couple of minutes to install under N.I.N.A. So just let it run, be patient, go take a cup of tea and let it do its thing. The installation takes much longer than expected, to the point that sometimes I think like, oh, has it crashed? It's not doing anything, I'm going to stop N.I.N.A. No. Just let it be. It will install or update itself. Don't worry about it. So let's see what happens when you have Advanced API as well as 3-point polar alignment installed. So Advanced API, you want to make sure that you keep everything the same, and in particular this API port. And then you want to have a smartphone that is connected to the same network as your N.I.N.A computer. So here, we're all on the same house network. My telescope is on my rooftop balcony, 2 or 3 floors above me, and I'm on my computer in my living room, and my smartphone is connected to the same network as everything else. So I have direct access to it. And I have installed the Advanced API, and it's active. N.I.N.A is installed, N.I.N.A is running, everything is good. Let's see how this would look like when using the app called Cygnus Astro. Okay, so I'm on my smartphone and I have this app which is available on the App Store. Simply enough, just search for it, Cygnus Astro. And I'm going to open up Cygnus Astro and we get this powered by N.I.N.A Advanced API thing. And you can see this super cool interface that is very similar to the ASI Air. And I can go ahead and connect all of my pieces of equipment in there. You can see we have the mount control there, so I can, and this is because N.I.N.A is already connected to the mount, so I can actually move it around, set the trackings to sidereal, slew to zenith to take flat frames, the usual stuff that is available in N.I.N.A, and I can disconnect and reconnect it, and you can see the mount is currently at the home position already. So we have that. Then you have the camera as well. And here you can do the same thing. Right now we are not connected to the camera, which means that N.I.N.A itself is not connected to the camera. So I can select QHY Minicam 8M, click on or tap on the connect button, and N.I.N.A in the background will connect to the camera. And once it's ready, there we go. We have access to a camera. It's currently at roughly 20 degrees or 20.1 degrees Celsius. It is not cooling, but I can tell it like, hey, cool yourself. And we should, after seeing the tab there, bam, the camera is cooling itself and the temperature is already dropping. And we have all of the information about the telescope in here as well. I'm telling it to warm itself. I don't need to cool it right now because we're not imaging just right now. But this is the way that this can work. This is really pretty cool. Then you could go for the focuser. So for me, it is FP2 ASCOM. It's a Gemini focuser. And why I need to connect that, again, it's because N.I.N.A hasn't connected to the equipment yet. I could tell N.I.N.A to just connect to everything, and this would be available without me having to do anything. And here it is. You can see that my current position is 50-41. I could tell the focuser to move to like 50-50, let's say instead of 50-41. Done, move. It's moving right now. The focuser, the whole focus assembly is moving, and now we are at 50-50. Amazing stuff. If we were during the night, I could do an autofocus and it would just show it to you directly in here. And you can see here, this is the last autofocus that I did. Actually, it's part of the autofocuses that we did together with the filter offset calculator plugin. And I think that's all pretty cool, and it's a very familiar interface if you're someone who's used to the ASI Air. And this is your main kind of ASI Air lookalike environment where you can have your telescope information, you have your guiding information. I'm going to skip that and go directly to the guiding because we want to make sure that we are connected to PhD2. So by doing that and clicking on connect, again, it just tells N.I.N.A please connect to PhD2. So in the background, just like we've shown earlier in this video, it will just start PhD2, loop, and there we could, again, if we were under a starry sky, start the guiding or even force it to calibrate as we start guiding with this checkbox here effectively. And then we have other devices that we can connect. For instance, I would want to connect my filter wheel. There we go, and I could change the filter to luminance, for instance. And there it is, it's moving to luminance filter, and momentarily it will tell me that it has finished moving to luminance, and there it is. We are on luminance for the filter wheel. You can also select a switch device if you have something like the RB-Focus Gaius S2 computer or something that has an ASCOM controllable USB and DC power hub. That would be from here. Unfortunately, there is no flip-flap panel yet that I can see, but you can see you also have an interface for 3-point polar alignment. So you have kind of all of the basics in here, and if I go back to the main imaging tab, I can check my focus information there and move the focuser around. So it's like 50-47, but now it has moved 20 steps upwards to, 50 steps upwards to 1597, bring it back to 50-47. It's like very similar interface to the ASI Air. I have the telescope that can move around, and I have the guide graph as well. I mean, come on, that's absolutely insane. It's amazing. It's so cool to have all of that available directly from a smartphone interface, as long as you're on the same network as the computer that runs N.I.N.A. And if the computer that runs N.I.N.A is something like the Gaius S2, it emits its own hotspot. So you just need to connect your smartphone to the Gaius S2 hotspot, and then you have this available, just like the ASI Air. It's like, basically it's the same thing as the ASI Air, just you have all the power of N.I.N.A and all of the capabilities and all of the supported equipment of N.I.N.A instead of just the ASI Air stuff. So I think that's absolutely insane and amazing. You can also drag and drop here the left-hand side panel to go and see what sequencer you have in there. So we have all of the stuff that we just added from the orbitals like JWST, etc. We have M31, and under each you can see exactly all of the steps that have been put in there, and you could start the sequence, stop it, reset it, etc. At this stage, I don't think that you're able to change any of the actual steps directly, but this is already pretty cool. And so that's the Cygnus Astro app that works if you have the advanced API installed under N.I.N.A as a plugin. And this is amazing. I absolutely love this. Okay, what about the other one, Touch and Stars, that requires you to have 3-point polar alignment, advanced API with that checkbox that we saw earlier, and the Touch and Stars plugin installed? Let's have a look. So, Touch and Stars, I'm going to open it. And here we are with Touch and Stars. And for Touch and Stars, I have a separate video where I presented this to you guys. So I'll put, again, if I remember, the link up above and down in the description. And Touch and Stars is available directly from the App Store as well. Now, Touch and Stars, in terms of initial setup, it has a setup wizard that has you basically input the either the host name or the IP address of the computer running N.I.N.A. So it's not as pretty as Cygnus Astro. Cygnus Astro just like detects your computer running N.I.N.A and gives you the interface like immediately. I don't know how it would work if you had multiple computers running N.I.N.A at the same time on the same network. I haven't tested that yet. Touch and Stars, if I go to the settings, you can see I have my RB Focus 149, which is my Gaius S2 computer, as one of the options. And then I have another one, which is the computer I'm connected to right now, which is this My Astro computer that I needed to set up initially with the proper parameters. But once it's done, you have access to all of the power of everything, just like you did effectively in the previous app, Cygnus Astro. So let's go to the first tab here, which is the connecting the equipment. You can connect everything, and again, it just instructs N.I.N.A to connect to all of the equipment. And in particular, we have the flat device that Cygnus Astro wasn't able to connect to because it doesn't have that setting in there. I can tell N.I.N.A to connect to a flat device, and we have connected to the flat device. And if you have a dome or as well, you could connect it from here. And then you could go to the camera tab here, and just like in Cygnus Astro, really, you can just take a 1 second exposure, for instance. So if you take a 1 second exposure, bam, you get the result. It's just a dark frame. And by the way, I didn't show it in Cygnus Astro, but it's exactly the same thing. If I go back to Cygnus Astro and I take an exposure, bam, we should see exactly the same thing. But because Cygnus Astro is in landscape mode, you have more field of view immediately in the image than you do with Touch and Stars. Now, in this particular tab, again, you have tons of cool controls for your mount, for your focuser, and also for your filter, to change the filter to whatever you want based on your filter wheel. And you also have access via the settings tab here to everything about the camera, including the gain, offset, set up the temperature of the camera, the parameters of the camera, everything is in there. It reminds me, more than it does of the SI Air, it reminds me of the StellarMate Pro and StellarMate OS, just a bit more intuitive and touch-friendly in the way that it works. But this is really nice as well to have at the tip of your fingertips. You also have the focuser tab directly, where you can start your autofocus and see the autofocus graph as it runs. You have your mount tab, and in the mount tab, you can, unpark, move the mount manually, etc. You can also slew the mount to a specific target. You could search for M31. Will that work? Yeah, and then I have the M41 interesting stuff, and I could slew to it, slew and center, open in Framing Assistant. How insane is this? And then choose my framing. Dude, this is absolutely amazing. It's insane that we're able to do this these days, determine the rotation from the camera, etc., etc. This is amazing. And then within the mount tab as well, you have the 3-point pole alignment that you can start just like you could from the Cygnus Astro app, but it's all on your smartphone. Again, you just need to connect to the same network as the computer running N.I.N.A. If it's the RB Focus Gaius S2, it has its own hotspot. Connect to a hotspot and you're golden, just like the SI Air. I find this amazing. Then you have the flat panel where you can, the cover is currently closed. I can turn on the light on my flat panel. There it is. Change the brightness. Take flat frames, because of course you have the flat wizard available now that I have the flat panel there. And you could say, like, I want to have auto brightness of my flat panel to target an exposure time of 1 second, and I want to do it for filter luminance. Start and do my flats for me directly in there. So you can see that Touch and Stars, it's probably not quite as pretty, I would say, as Cygnus Astro. And you need to set up your IP address and stuff like that, or our host name for a computer. But wow, does it have many features packed in there. It really lets you control almost everything about N.I.N.A. You have the guiding stuff in there as well, just as expected. I already showed the flat wizard. You have also a planetarium software right in there. So you can choose anything and slew to it. And you can search for stuff directly in there. And I can change the time so it's dark. So let's put it at like 21:05 today. And then we can see what's going on and what targets we have. And let's see, I select this target and you can see I can slew to it, slew and center, go to framing because I want to frame the target. So now it's gonna frame the target. I can open the framing assistant and oh, come on, how amazing is this? I mean, I want to use this more than I want to use the N.I.N.A interface on desktop. This is insane. This is so cool, right? So you have all of that available literally at your fingertips with this, this planetarium software there. I mean, I love this. And then finally, the tab I didn't go to yet is this sequencer tab. And again, you need to drag and drop this top bar there. If you're not used to it, it would look like there's not a lot of features. So remember, drag and drop, and there you can start the sequence, stop the sequence. And if you tap on the edit button, I don't think you can add stuff to the sequence yet, or at least if you can, I haven't figured out how, but it makes this turn on and off kind of button available. So you can turn on and off parts of the sequence as you require. So there's some limited ability to change the sequence that you have. Still, overall, this is pretty amazing, and I know that they are working on adding a full like sequencer edit in here. And so then when we have that, this like N.I.N.A plus Touch and Stars or Cygnus Astro plus the plugin Advanced API plus something like a Gaius S2, it becomes a complete 100% replacement for the SIR, except that it's a more powerful replacement that supports more hardware. Amazing stuff. And that effectively concludes my tutorial or my how-to for N.I.N.A. I think it's running something like 4 hours in total, something like that. So I have it already published in different parts, but you might be watching a video where I have put everything together into a single primer, like the ultimate guide to N.I.N.A, and I hope it's really useful to you guys. If it is, or if you have further tips and tricks, let us know down in the comments and really comment, just shout out anything you like. It really helps the visibility of the video by interacting with it. Like the videos as well, it really helps out. And again, you can subscribe to the channel, or if you want to support the channel even more at no cost to you, and you're planning on buying anything, even if it's not Astro related, from Amazon, Agena, High Point Scientific, First Light Optics, astroshop.eu, etc. If you do so after clicking one of the links that I have down in the description, it will help me out, again, at no cost to you. And if you want to sponsor the channel directly, make all of this work possible directly, you can join the channel as a member. It's the join button next to the subscribe button, or join as a Patreon member. The link is down in the description. Again, some of my Patreon ranks have access to my videos early without ads. And I have a Discord experiment going on for my Patreon members. With that, I hope this video was useful. Let us know down again in the comments whether you have some cool plugins you'd like to highlight. But more important than all of that, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, whenever you can, to look up at the stars, and I'll see you next time.